And I say, yo, bum rush the show. Welcome in. It is the Audible Live each and every Thursday night. It's the Football Guys. Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman, Dr. Jene Bramel, here to talk about all things NFL, all things fantasy football, and all things about what's in Sigmund's room behind him.
That's right. It's Halloween. No, this is good. Again, another mention for the love of my life, my fiance Kate, and she wanted to. She thought it would be a really good idea to be festive, and we have a nostalgic game tonight, an AFL game. I think Matt Waldman. Can you remember the AFL? No, not quite. No, but you can wax poetic. You can wax poetic around about
all I can say is this: I love these games because. Yeah. The only problem is that if Marshawn Lynch didn't do it right.
No.
He needed to go out there and do a backflip on top of the official, kind of like Ben Davidson did, back in the 70s when I was a kid watching those old AFL clips from like years before I was born. Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking about you wax poetic about the Al Davis Raiders as beautifully as anybody I've heard wax poetic about it. And this is definitely a throwback game to that game. And both of these teams, the Chiefs know they're 5-1, but it can slip away really quickly in the NFL. This is basically a must-win game for the Raiders. So we've seen these teams open it up. Great for fantasy football, and we've seen the pendulum swing back for Amari Cooper, although he's still letting balls literally pass between his hands. But he caught a flea flicker where he pushed off, but they just decided to give it to him because they felt sorry for him because it'd been a while. And then you see the speed. And you're seeing Derek Carr look much better in this game. They're not committing to Marshawn Lynch before he gets thrown out for a ref, had him wrapped up, and he shoved the ref off of him. You're gone. He knew it, too. He started walking to the sideline right away. Jalen Richard, a Matt Waldman favorite, looking good in this one, and we'll get a full audition in the second half, I think. And on the Kansas City side, Alex Smith, after not being able to move the ball against the Steelers, finds Tyreek Hill deep, leads Travis Kelce in the end zone. Settled for a couple of field goals, but all offense, no defense in this game. Justin Houston had one fumble recovery that was taken away on a legal contact penalty. There has been very, very little defense in this game. It's been like a 7-on-7 drill.
Get off me, son, or get off me. This is my son. Either way, we made it work. No defense in an AFC West matchup. That's very ironic. Dr. Jene Bramel is here to talk about. Oh God, Andrew Luck, is he just not going to play this year, Dr. Jene? What's the latest? What are your thoughts here?
Who?
Mr. Luck, Mr. Andrew Luck.
I don't know who you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. We talk more about a guy that's not going to play this year every single week on this show. Is that the way it's shaping up? Are we looking at Luck just missing the whole year?
I think they're hopeful that he can still come back. I think they want to see him prove that he's healthy enough to play this year. But he was arguably 2 to 3 weeks from returning already before this setback, and that's what it is. It's definitely a setback. Not exactly sure why. Is there something related to the surgery? Is there, with the way his shoulder is moving now, knowing that he played with it loose for a couple, is there still some looseness in there? Is there some more stiffness where they're having difficulty stretching it out a little bit? But to get a cortisone shot, you need a minimum of a week, and you're probably looking at 2 weeks where they don't allow him to do much at all to allow the inflammation to calm down and not counteract the effects of what you hope the cortisone shot to do. And then he was 2 to 3 weeks away, and that was after a week or two of some limited every other day practice. So I think you're looking at a minimum of 6 weeks before he can come back. And then at that point, assuming they're not in the playoff race, is it worth putting him out there? I think that's going to be an open question. It'll depend on how the offensive line is functioning, how the rest of the offense is functioning. And as cautious as they've been, assuming that the beginning of this was caution, we're looking at every bit of 10 months now. So why rush back for a couple of weeks at the end of the season just to see if he can play, rather than just continuing with the strengthening and rehabilitation program throughout the offseason? I think the bigger question for me is, and we're not going to know the answer to this right now, is why was the cortisone shot necessary? And depending on what the answer to that question is, how likely is it that he ever returns close to what his pre-injury form was? And I'm not saying that to be shocking or speculative or sensational or anything like that. I think it's an open question at this point. I think the type of labral repair he had was unexpected. Everybody expected it to be a slap tear, and it was more the back, meaning the the top and in front of his shoulder, and it turned out to be the back, which is it's a technically more difficult procedure. And he's not come back. I don't think anybody at this point would say that he came back as quickly as they hoped. Maybe there wasn't a specific setback, but something's going on there. So we're not going to get the answer to that quickly, but I think that's going to be the primary question through the offseason. Luck is not going to talk about it. The Colts, after their experience now, probably are not going to talk about it. So it's going to be an open question until we get to the point where we see him throw. Is the Andrew Luck of 2018 and beyond going to be the Andrew Luck of 2016 and previous? I don't know the answer to that yet, but this what happened this week is a big deal.
Didn't Greg Cook wear number 12?
Stop.
Stop. Come on. He didn't deserve that. Well, you don't care about the Bengals, though. And a quick aside before I answer, I'm going to take the wheel here because I was talking to one of all of our favorite people, Eric Stoner, about this. We were texting back and forth about the buzz of Andrew Luck getting traded. It's back. And Chris Ballard, I think, is a GM who's not going to sit back. And in some ways, whether Ballard would decide to trade Andrew Luck should tell us what he thinks about that question. And the name Chad Pennington was used in this conversation. And I think that Eric decided that if he gets traded to Cleveland, he's done. But
watch out for the Broncos then. If Andrew Luck is truly available, John Elway'd fall all over himself, even if it's like half of Luck of what we normally know.
Right. And it would be full circle. And that would be full circle, right? Because it was the ritualistic, occult, black magic sacrifice of Peyton Manning that got Indianapolis Andrew Luck, but it was actually Denver who only wanted to, speaking of exercise, a true exorcism of Tim Tebow. The only way to exercise him from the franchise was getting Peyton Manning, and they got the Super Bowl. So
well, and there's something in common with disliking Irsay's. I know Peyton put on a great face, and I don't want to, start any rumors or whatever, but we know, Peyton wasn't done, and that hurt. And Elway and the Irsay's, we know that because he said this to the Colts when they were going to draft him and did, and then got traded to the Broncos.
Yeah, and Dr. Gene's not being sensational, but Dr. Gene knows there's something
sensational
there. Okay, don't be sensational about this. Calm us down. Jameis Winston, he's never missed a game, Gene. That means it's going to be fine, right?
I'm not going to be able to recover from the Greg Cook comment. I don't know how many people Matt are going to know. I think it's awesome that all three of us reacted the same way within a millisecond of you invoking the name Greg Cook. For those of you who don't know, he would have been
fantastic.
Yeah, West Coast. Chris Wessling wrote a definitive, wonderful piece on him.
Yes, yeah, that was awesome. And I can remember writing about Greg Cook when Paul Brown died years and years ago. So look him up if you haven't already. There's lots of good information about Cook and the beginnings of the West Coast offense with Bill Walsh and and all those players out in Cincinnati. So Jameis Winston, I think Jameis Winston is going to play. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion at this point. He has not been cleared to throw the ball through Thursday. They were hopeful that they were going to allow him to do that. Dirk Cutter said that he was going to allow Winston to take all of the first team reps on Friday, but multiple beat writers have said that's really not much more than 2-minute drills and red zone work. So it's not going to be a lot, but it doesn't have to be a lot. All we're really looking to see from Winston at this point is, does he have a free and full throwing motion? And if he does, then he can play. If he doesn't, then he's not going to. And it doesn't have to be tomorrow. He can do a little bit tomorrow. The hope is that they allow him to throw tomorrow. He feels okay after practice. He feels okay on Saturday. And if that's the case, he's going to go. And we probably don't have to worry about him too much. There's always a risk that he could take a hit on that area or be taken to the ground again. We talk about this with these AC sprains all the time. But I think the trend is mostly positive. Winston said today that his thought process was that he was going to go, but there's still some steps yet before he's going to be cleared to do so. So Friday's practice participation report and media session is going to be key. And then what we won't know until Sunday morning is whether or not he felt well enough on Saturday for there to be any concern. So Winston is a high enough profile play that we're going to have an idea before the end of Sunday morning. Tweet news and notes from Schefter and Rappaport what's going on, but I expect him at this point. I think he's more likely to play than not.
Well, now that we know that Wolverine's adamantium injection didn't take very well, can we go and move down to Jacksonville and talk about Juggernaut and see whether or not how he's doing with that wheel?
He said today that he's definitely playing. Leonard Fournette did. And the mechanism of injury there, it wasn't a knee thing to be concerned about. It was kind of the turf moving under, and then his foot gave way. And everybody knows that his ankles have been a concern. But the Jaguars have been cautious with this from the beginning. They know what his history is. They know what's going on with him right now. And they've already been kind of managing his reps based on the foot and ankle stuff that he's had, even going back to the preseason. So he was cleared to run today. Didn't seem to go poorly at all. He's going to be asked to cut on that ankle tomorrow. And this is basically taking what he did last Sunday before he was cleared to go back in the game and spreading it out over a 5-day period. So when you clear a player to go back into a game with an outside ankle injury like that, with a typical ankle sprain where the ankle gets rolled, is you ask them to sprint and run in a straight line and make sure that they can stop quickly enough to protect themselves. And then you ask them to plant and cut. And if they can do those things, then, whether or not you need to reinforce the tape job or whatever it is, they're okay to go. And that's what they're asking Fournette to do. So the fact that he hasn't practiced all week really means not much to the game plan. If he proves that he's able to do what he needs to do tomorrow, he's going to play, and I don't think his workload is going to be that limited. It sounds like he could have gone back in Sunday, and that's what I expect to happen. It's not a foregone conclusion at this point because he hasn't cut and stressed his foot and ankle, but I think that's what the plan has been all along, and unless there's something unexpected that happens on Friday, I think he's going to play this week.
Hamstrings can be problematic. Just ask DeMarco Murray. And when asked, Coach Mike Mularkey said today, Khalfani Muhammad would get signed from the practice squad if DeMarco Murray is unable to play against the Browns in Week 7. Of course, Derrick Henry's fantasy owners are loving what they got last week. They're licking their chops against the Browns this week, especially if Murray doesn't play. So how are you feeling about DeMarco Murray this week, Dr. Gene?
Yeah, and that's what's different this week than the last time 2 weeks ago where Murray didn't really practice much with a hamstring that sounded concerning. It's been something that's bothering him since the preseason, and I was speculating fairly earlier in the week that, these aggravated hamstring injuries, like we've seen with Corey Davis, who hasn't been back for a month, that they're just hard to play through. But there wasn't really any pessimism from Tennessee a couple of weeks ago. Murray eventually came back to practice. He looked good in warmups, and he outsnapped and outproduced Derrick Henry in that particular game. Well, this is different for a couple of reasons. One, and I think probably three things. One is this is the same injury that he's been fighting for 2 months, and at some point you have to say there's just too much risk here. We need to allow him to heal. Two, Cleveland's defense is good, yes, but I think they would be hopeful that they could manage a running game with Derrick Henry, who looked good and has always looked good at times, knowing that next week there's a bye involved. And then three, at no point 2 weeks ago did Mike Mularkey suggest that they were going to pull a player off the practice squad on Thursday. So I think the bye week is probably the pressing issue. If they keep him from playing this week, he'll have 2 full weeks at minimum without practicing and healing time, and 3 weeks between his 2 games. He was on the sideline with a big wrap on that hamstring, took it off and tried to come back and play. I think he's doubtful. I would be very confident saying he was doubtful and likely inactive if he hadn't come back and played a couple of weeks ago in a similar situation. So lots and lots and lots, and we'll get to more of these soon, of Friday practice participation, what's going to be key. But I'm thinking again that Murray is doubtful, and I think it's more likely that that'll prove to be the case this week than it was a couple of weeks ago.
Another one, you teed up, you led the segue yourself there. Kelvin Benjamin, the concern, swelling, same knee tweaked. They don't have their bye until week 11. They can beat the Bears without Kelvin Benjamin, right?
Sure. So I didn't see this myself. I didn't go back and review the videotape, but there were a couple of reports from beat writers that you could see a large area of swelling, a bruise on the inside of the knee. And it's the surgically repaired knee, but that's not an issue in this case. So Ron Rivera said today that they really weren't sure what was going on, and he was still having soreness, so they sent him to a doc for further evaluation. So if it's something as simple as that blood collection really hasn't resorbed at all, maybe he gets that drained, some of the pain goes down, and if that's the case, he'll probably practice tomorrow and be fine. If it's more of a little bit of a structural concern, or they're worried about a bone bruise, or there's something else that they want, and we didn't hear about any imaging studies or anything like that, then I think he's a whole lot closer to doubtful. But basically, when the media availability happened today, they weren't really sure. I don't believe they were sure of or knew what the results of that evaluation was. So we'll hear about that tomorrow. It's possible still that we could get a DNP from Benjamin tomorrow and him practice and play well this weekend. But you'd sure like to see him at least be limited so they could evaluate how he responds to practice this weekend before we're certain that he's going to play.
How likely is it that Aaron Rodgers goes to IRR?
That's a good question. And I don't think it's one that we can answer because we're not really privy to what happened in surgery and what the surgeon saw. But that's the key question. The key question isn't why did he wait until Thursday to have surgery or why did he have surgery at all? I think all of that was expected. The question becomes, if Aaron Rodgers is not on injured reserve by 4 o'clock on Saturday, they're not going to put him on injured reserve unless there's some sort of concern in the first couple of weeks because they've artificially extended the timetable a week. It becomes 9 weeks instead of 8 if he's on injured reserve into next week. And there's just no sense in doing that. So if he doesn't go on injured reserve tomorrow or Saturday before 4, then you have to think that the team believes that there's a chance that he can come back before 8 weeks. And practice sooner than that. So then I think you kind of put him in that 6 to 8 week timetable. Not to say that it's 100% certain that it won't take 8 weeks or more, just that there was something about the appearance of the surgery, how well the surgery went, or their planning stages that they think there's a chance he can return before 8 weeks. And I don't think we can say anything more than that. But I think that's absolutely the case. Not to say that something couldn't go on a little bit further where they put him on injured reserve later, but that's the decision-making process that's happening now is, do we think that we can get him back sooner than 8 weeks? And if the answer to that is yes, then they're not going to put him on injured reserve. Otherwise, I don't think they've got, many players, Demarius Randall's not coming back. Vince Beigel is kind of around there too, but I don't think there's anybody on the injured reserve list and they can activate too. So there's no reason to try to sneak him through and hold him for 8 weeks if they think it's going to be 8 weeks before he can come back. They'll put him on IR. So if he didn't go on IR by Saturday, I think that's a really good sign for his availability a little bit sooner than everybody was hopeful.
In a very Monty Python type of way. It's just a flesh wound. It's all right. I got better. Devante Parker says he's feeling much better. I got better, says Devante Parker. What say you, Dr. Gene?
I'm not going to believe that until you see him back at practice, simply because we're not certain what type of ankle sprain that he had. And the longer you go without practicing, the less you want to believe that it's a low ankle sprain, like what Sterling Shepard is dealing with. And like what Leonard Fournette is dealing with. So I saw that note today, but there still doesn't seem to be a lot of optimism around in Miami that he's going to be able to go. Maybe he's yet another one of these players this year that goes where they don't practice for a while. Bilal Powell, for example, today, when he didn't practice yesterday, you had to wonder, is he going to play at all this week? And then he's fully practicing and ready to go. So I suppose there's a possibility that happens with Parker on Friday, but I wouldn't count on it.
Jimmy, going to see Josh Norman return Monday night. Is it safe to play Alshon Jeffery?
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of odd that was given, there was an initial 3 to 4 week timetable, and that wasn't really based on the rib injury. It was based on, the opening in the lung he had. So, maybe they got a much more reassuring scan last week and early this week than they expected, and they really have only listed him with the rib injury. So maybe that part of things healed more quickly, and they don't have any concern that there could be a setback, and one that could be very significant in this case. So I'm still waiting to hear what Washington has to say about that. I guess I give him a better chance. Well, not guess. You have to give him a better chance of playing now than you would have on Monday or Tuesday. But I still think it's unlikely that he's going to go.
Give us some hope, or give Bloom and Cecil some hope about the Steelers' offensive line.
All right. I don't think Marcus Gilbert is going to play. But Ramon Foster was back to a full practice today. And if I'm remembering correctly, Marquise Pouncey, yes, was a full practice today too. So I think you're getting both Foster and Pouncey back. But I think it's going to be a couple of weeks on Gilbert before he's ready to return.
It is the Audible live each and every Thursday night. And I got to see Demaryius Thomas today. And I got to see him limited in practice. I got to see him wearing compression sleeve on his bruised calf. Anything to take away from the last game, just watching his mannerisms, Dr. Gene, and then, seeing I've seen practice last year where he had the hip thing, and he's sitting there banging on his hip and walking around like an old man, and then he goes out on Sunday and does some good things. No Emmanuel Sanders this week. We already know that. How big of a concern is this calf bruise? And I will say, just for the viewing and listening audience, I've seen Demaryius look a lot worse in practice and still play and play well on Sunday. But it is something to note, and he definitely, looks a bit uncomfortable out there.
Yeah, and I think this is another one of those situations where you're waiting and waiting and waiting for him to recover as much as possible. Those bruises can be difficult when they're in the muscle belly. It sounds like he got leg whipped, and those contusions are tough, especially ones on the lower leg if they're near the shin or the calf. The outside of the leg, maybe not as much, but on the calf or the shin bone itself, it's going to be a problem. So I think it was good that they allowed him to do some limited stuff today. Didn't sound like, and then you backing up, what I was able to read from some of the other beat writers today. I don't think that there's going to be a big concern for him. I think they're planning for him to play. I don't know that I would necessarily expect a full practice tomorrow, but I think it's likely he's going to be able to go. And then we're watching for any signs that we're being told that he's not moving well on Friday in through pregame warmups on Sunday, but I think we'll probably be okay.
If you wanted to be sneaky and add somebody who is on IR right now, but as we get through the bye week gauntlet, maybe every week they're more worth a roster spot. There's some candidates, guys like Greg Olsen or Danny Woodhead or Corey Coleman. Obviously, David Johnson, we can leave him out of this conversation. But does anybody stand out to you as someone that if you didn't like anything you saw on the waiver wire and wanted to start stashing someone away for a possible return? Who do you like? You're muted.
Greg Olsen is the guy that fits that category for me. I think I did that in a shallow league already earlier this week. We talked about last week. I think David Johnson is a clear leader. I don't really like what I'm hearing about Danny Woodhead so far. It does not sound like he's going to be ready to return to practice as soon as he's eligible. But if there's absolutely nothing out there, knowing that Terrence West is fighting through a calf injury, I don't know if I like enough of that Baltimore offense. But if you're in a PPR league, maybe Danny Woodhead with the potential to get 6 or 8 targets a game is somebody that you hope you get back for the playoffs a little bit. I think there's a chance we get Corey Coleman back before too long. That might be a player that you take a chance on. But again, Cleveland's quarterback situation is so messy that you just have a hard time expecting that to be the case. And I don't think we're going to get Rico Gathers back. He sounds like he's still struggling. Everybody else is either not going to be a big part of the offense or I don't expect to return this year. So if Greg Olsen is out there, I was happy that they put him on injured reserve because that meant they weren't going to try to get him back in 5 or 6 weeks and push it in the same way that we saw Dez Bryant and other players with that similar injury push it in the past. So I would expect him to be able to return pretty quickly when he's eligible to do so, and that's week 11. So he may not be ready to go just yet, but I think there's a very good chance that he's going to be available for you in weeks 14, 15, and 16, and fully available where he's getting his pre-injury workload.
Let's travel to Minnesota and talk a little bit about, one, Stephon Diggs and the groin injury, but number 2, I'd just like your kind of thought here because I like to poke and prod you about your level of caution when it comes to players. So when you see something like Mike Zimmer, Mr. Grump Man kind of say, let's pump the brakes on Teddy Bridgewater, and then the next day Bridgewater practices a bit or moves around a bit at least. And he goes, well, he's not going to play this week. Does that get your spidey senses tingling, or you're just like, yeah, whatever. That's just, he's going to say that for the next 5 weeks.
Well, yeah, maybe a little bit of that, but I don't think statement 1 and statement 2 are incorrect. I think Teddy Bridgewater was not going to return to practice and then play right away. They want to see him. They want to reassimilate him. They want to get him to start doing some football. He has not practiced in 18 months the whole time. So he's got to get used to the brace. He's got to get used to players being around him. They may even want him to take a little bit of contact before they put him back on the field. And even though they've got a 3-week window to make a decision, he is not going to be a player like a Shane Ray or maybe a couple of others that I'm slipping my mind here that you may get back immediately when you can. I think Bridgewater's most likely return date is after Minnesota's bye. I think they take that time to get him into the game plan, assimilate him into the offense, and then let him go from there, especially if, as I expect, Sam Bradford is still weeks away too. So I think what Zimmer said was fine, which is, don't get your hopes up. But yeah, we're going to allow him to practice, and they're going to consider him week to week. But that bye week is just sitting there. I just don't see them playing him so soon. I think it's going to come after that. So it's not going to be this week. It's going to be pretty soon after that. Diggs continues to say that this injury isn't as bad as it was last year. But again, that doesn't mean that he's not going to miss time. He has not been out on the practice field. He didn't do as much on Thursday as I think they hoped and he wanted to do. That doesn't rule him out for this week. We might still see him get back to a limited Friday practice and be active. But if he's active this week, he's going to look as he did in the week he got injured, where he's not going to be doing much on the field. I don't like using the word decoy, but there are going to be routes that he's going to be able to run and routes that he's not going to be able to run, and they're not going to put him on the field if they're not able to do so. Now, Michael Floyd is probably not going to play this week. There are other issues out there. So, maybe if he's close, they make him active so they have a body out there to do some things with. But he's not practiced for 2 weeks with a groin injury that is required a lot of rehabilitation. And he's told us this week he's not 100% healthy. So he's another player that I think, it's getting closer and closer to the bye week, and he wants to play. But would you rather have a much closer to 100% Stephon Diggs for the last 6 weeks of the season, or take a risk that you stay dinged up through the bye and you fight through things like you did? So, the next few practices, if he's not able to go this week, are going to be just as important as what may happen tomorrow.
He's Dr. Jene Bramel. He hates decoys and he hates these cans. And he's also the best guy on this show. So, Dr. Jene, looking at you, buddy. Thank you very much. As always, we appreciate your contributions, not only on this show, but also on the Waiver Wire show. And as always, at footballguys.com, you follow him on Twitter at Jene Bramel. Dr. Jene,
thank you, boys. I appreciate it. Thanks as always. We will talk next week.
All right, chat room, it's time to react to me. I love the fact, Bloom, that we've got new people jumping in on the chat room because this is an experience, and we don't go 2 hours like we used to, so we don't go a little loopy like we used to. But hammer in here on the old Crown Royal. We're trying. We'll get a little loopy, a little goofy, and talk some important things. But first, a game update, Bloom.
Yeah, Oakland goes down the field. Just what you see here, and I want to use this as an opportunity to maybe to toss something around among the two of you. But what you saw is DeAndre Washington, and what really stood out to me about DeAndre Washington at Texas Tech, just the energy, the kinetic energy he ran with, and you're really seeing that tonight. A lot of determination on his touchdown run, his short yardage run. There were these 2 or 3 guys that had a hand on him, and he just kept churning his legs and generating that power and getting in. And we know what Jalen Richard can do. And what's interesting is even before Marshawn Lynch was ejected from this game, and perhaps it contributed to what happened. Let's be honest. When he came off, when he was so frustrated and he threw the ref off of him, they're just not using him. Right now he's looking at Marshawn Lynch maybe and saying, man, I wish that Arizona traded for me, because they're not using him. They're not using him in that great Marshawn Lynch way. And there's Albert Wilson taking one to the house as the AFL Chiefs are back here. And hopefully you had a piece of this game for your lineup this week. It's the Chiefs take the
not Albert Wilson though.
No, it was a game time decision actually. So interesting. It just busted coverage basically. Oh, and it was a deflected ball.
And Bert alerts are going across Twitter right now for Matt Harmon.
Yeah, and it almost picked off. I can't tell exactly which one of the safeties that was, if it was Reggie Nelson or not, who got their hands on the ball, but it just goes straight. It was very reminiscent of Devery Henderson, right? The LSU. I'm sorry, not Devery.
Yeah,
was it?
It was Devery Henderson. Yep,
Devery Henderson's
LSU, Kentucky. Great.
Robin Williams in the best of times.
Yeah. We're just dropping all the references.
That's when LSU didn't lose to Troy.
Yeah. Well, we just don't talk about. Hey, Syracuse beat Clemson this year, so if we're going to start talking about all, some of these teams coming back from the dead, but I just think that you bring Marshawn Lynch back from retirement, and part of the value, and I hope I can get Matt Waldman nodding along a little bit, is part of the value of running a player 20 or 25 times a game when they have the mentality of a Peterson or a Lynch is the mentality it gives your offensive line, and the Raiders have an offensive line that is built to do this, to just demoralize the opponent. Like, when the defensive players, like, they hate that feeling of putting their hand on the ground because they know someone's going to run at them and push them back and hurt them and punish them. And by the fourth quarter, your soul, your spirit starts to shy away from that clash. And they're not running the ball that way. Even when they have Jalen Richard or DeAndre Washington out there, it's not the same kind of running game. It's not the same kind of experience. And they don't seem to show any will to get Marshawn Lynch up to 18 or 20 carries in a game, which just seems so strange to me, because when they signed him, one of the things they said is like, oh, we'll give him the ball at the goal line, referencing that famous play. And I wonder what the plan is here. And if they can't win this game at 2-5, I guess the plan might not matter, because the season's going to end.
Well, it's an identity crisis. I mean, my God, Jack Del Rio, I know you love vanilla and you hate Baskin Robbins because you don't need 31 flavors, but Christ! What the hell's the matter with you, Del Rio? How do you not know to feed Marshawn Lynch? And listen, no disrespect to his TV show on Bleacher Report, but I don't give a damn about any of that. I don't want to see Marshawn Lynch driving in race cars. I want to see Marshawn Lynch running the ball. That's what I want to see. And Matt, we're just not getting it this year, and it's disgusting to me.
Yeah, it is. And when people are like, well, look at his yard per carry average. Well, one, go check out Adam Harstad's work on yards per carry average, and then you'll never want to use it again. Basically, when you talk about Lynch, I mean, even tonight, there were some plays he had 2 or 3 yard gains, but it's because the offensive line or the runs that they had, the Chiefs defended well, and he did everything he was supposed to do to get the positive yards that he got. And those are a lot of his carries. The fact is that they like to, for whatever reason, the Raiders like to play that wussy style of running the football, basically going, oh,
that pause was priceless.
Pussy Willow.
Yes. And just basically run from shotgun against nickel. Oh, we're going to get cute and run the ball here on a passing down situation. They did more with Latavius Murray last year from 2 tight end sets than what we've seen with Marshawn Lynch. And, I'll add this about him coming off the field. I think Marshawn Lynch knows Mitchell pretty well. And Mitchell was one who made the late hit.
Marcus Peters, you mean?
Oh, it was Peters, yes.
Yeah, Oakland guys.
That's true. But he ran out there. I think he was trying to get to the player and separate him and talk to him and just kind of like, and of course he made a huge mistake to push the ref, but I think that it was more like trying to get the ref out of his way so that he could actually just pull that guy aside. We'll find out, I'm sure, within the next day or two. And you definitely want to get Richard and or Washington onto your roster as an end of depth chart type of player, because I'm sure that we're going to see Marshawn Lynch have a week or 2 off after what he did, especially with the NFL hating him like they do in the front office there. The fact that he's left egg on their faces numerous times in just being a real person. They're probably going to take every opportunity. I'm just going totally off narrative street here, but they're going to take every opportunity to give him a punishment that people will be going, well, Josh Brown and what he did. But seriously, the Raiders, it's like, this is a team that they don't need to have Seth Roberts in there. They need another tight end in there, and they put Wallaway. What's his name? Wallaway. Yeah, put him in there as the fullback and let Marshawn run behind that. Heck, put Jalen Richard as the fullback. He played fullback at Southern Mississippi and did it well. Put him in there at fullback and let Marshawn Lynch run behind it. The fact of the matter is what Bloom said is, when you look at carry-by-carry basis for running backs who are going to be power players and you're going to wear teams down, you control the clock. Yes, you're going to have short losses and short gains throughout these strings of carries, but then you're also going to break off bigger runs because defenses are going to get less disciplined. And did we see that against Kansas City last week from the Pittsburgh Steelers, who just decided, forget it, we're just going to run the ball, we're going to commit to it, and we're going to channel our 1970s, 1980s, early 90s Pittsburgh Steelers, and we're just going to hand the ball to one of the best players in the NFL and let him carry us. It was a thing of beauty. I mean, I loved it, and they're showing it right now, at least on my delayed screen, of him basically running through the Chiefs defense. And I just can't believe that they're not doing that. They weren't doing that with Marshawn Lynch. All they're doing is getting cute running counter plays with Jared Cook, a glorified wide receiver. They need to put Lee Smith in there. Isn't Lee Smith still the tight end?
Yes.
They need to put Lee Smith, the guard playing, posing as a tight end, and let him get in there. It's one of the worst things I've seen outside of Adrian Peterson signing with the Saints.
Remember when we saw Lee Smith at the Senior Bowl? It was like another seeing Lee Smith. It was almost like Luke Stocker, right? It was like, what is this? Why is there another pillar?
But with muscle.
Is this like a Lad Peebles pillar that's moving on the field? Like,
At least he had girth. I mean, Stocker looked like Mike Glennon playing wide receiver.
You cannot overrate girth.
No.
Just saying. Bloom, anything in the game we need to get to before we get to some chat questions?
Stalling out, Oakland drive stalling out on 3rd and 12. And, this is just, kudos to Kansas City for really restoring the balance after their offense stalled out against the Steelers and restoring that sense of being able to score it from anywhere on the field, which was really missing in that game.
Either I'm a lightweight or this crown is really strong. But anyway, do you remember the time Cecil got drunk on the air, Bloom?
Yeah, everybody get all this. Get this. Well, it is recorded, so we're good.
Yeah, we're good. We're on YouTube right now, youtube.com/footballguys, DOTCOM. I'll try to calm down and
you said that pretty darn well for being
slushy, social. Matt, let's talk about Brett Hundley. Some of our best conversations happen. Honestly, I want to take people behind the scenes on our road trip to Mobile on that 6-hour car drive, because it's either like rants about Paxton Lynch or discussions about Brett Hundley. Do you remember our discussions about Brett Hundley when he came out of UCLA, and just the conversation revolving around that? Because there's so many fantasy owners right now that are feeling the Aaron Rodgers effects. I know I am. And in Festival OG, Brett Hundley is long gone and no shot of getting him, although I did put in a bid on him. So when you look at this Packers offense going forward with Hundley as their quarterback, Matt, you've written a lot about Brett Hundley. You've talked a lot about him. Let's revisit some of those conversations and then put it in today's context of him being the man for Green Bay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that we have to understand is this is a guy who's had 3 years to watch Aaron Rodgers play and learn that system. So he's not some rookie who's like trying to adjust to the West Coast offense. He's been playing in the same West Coast offense with the same coaching staff and the same personnel pretty much for 3 years with the same quarterback ahead of him who's the best one in the NFL. So you're going to get you're going to have a poised player who I think is not going to have as steep of a learning curve. The things that he's going to have to work on are going to be more about, wide receiver play in terms of rapport with certain places where the receivers want to have the ball placed, but really you could see with his game that, this is a guy that when we look back at him at UCLA, he was a top quarterback prospect before he came out. The year before he came out, he looked like he was going to be one of the top 3 and mentioned there. But, one of the things I know we talked about was some stuff that I'd had shared with Eric Stoner, and Eric Stoner shared with me when we did an RSP film room. And he talked about the fact that, Jim Mora Jr. didn't want Brett Hundley to do any audibling, didn't want him to call any line, make any line adjustments. Their line was horrible. They were basically like, Brett, just use your legs or use your arm or just use your athletic ability and figure it out. If you're in a bad situation, well, just be an athlete, as opposed to you're in a bad situation, change the line call or do these things. So it kind of gave him a perception pre-draft that he wasn't an intelligent quarterback, that he might not be equipped to be able to make that next level adjustment. And then he came into Green Bay in August, and they had no expectation of him doing anything but maybe being on the practice squad. And he showed up, basically started a group with a bunch of young players trying to make it on the squad where they all watched film together. He learned the offense very fast, and he led the NFL in quarterback rating as a rookie in the preseason. And they were like, we were surprised at how fast he picked things up. Well, it's like, yeah, because Jim Mora basically didn't want to give any control to his quarterbacks. The only reason that he probably got Josh Rosen is Rosen said something stupid to get kicked out of the opportunity to be with Stanford. He's talked about that. And number 2, he probably said, there's no way I'm coming to play for you, Jim Mora Jr., unless you allow me to make line calls and audibles, as opposed to that. And, that's why that's changed. But I mean, when you look at Hundley, he throws well on the move, left to right. He's someone that can make plays, and he comes back from difficult situations where maybe he makes a dumb play here or there, and you're going to see defenses test him with more blitzes and him have to, probably fit things over, dropping linebackers and some coverages that may cause him to make mistakes. But he's always done a good job of recovering from mistakes, and he's more poised in the pocket and had better footwork than people often talked about. And I still believe this. If Marcus Mariota were playing for Jim Mora Jr. at UCLA and Brett Hundley were playing at Oregon, Brett Hundley would be the Heisman-winning national championship finalist quarterback, and Marcus Mariota would have been the nitpick to death athletic quarterback who wound up in the 5th round for a team and didn't see the light of day for a couple of years. And then they might be talking about how he's too soft-spoken to be a quarterback in the NFL. And, because he looks like the shy guy at a dance who's holding up the wall with his personality. But who really cares about any of that? He plays good football. I think Brett Hundley will be a good boon for fantasy owners that may not be the same level for the outside receivers, but those guys will continue to put up starter production, maybe just a tier or a half a tier below than where they are right now.
Matt, you missed an opportunity to quote Young MC backwards as MC Young. You're standing on the wall like he was Poindexter. What's up with all the pineapples? Bloom, let's talk about Brett Hundley and your thoughts.
Yeah, I went back and watched, and his numbers weren't great last week. I went back and watched that game with Minnesota, and I was pleasantly surprised. What I saw, and one of these things is a reason for pause, though. Minnesota was hitting him on the majority of plays. He was under pressure. He was not able to run the plays as drawn up or stay in the timing of the play or stay, at the top of his drop and survey the field. So part of that was 3 injuries to the offensive linemen. We didn't get a chance to ask Dr. Gene, but I know both tackles, Bakhtiari and Balaga, have been limited so far in practice. Even if they play, going up against New Orleans, Alex Okafor, reinvented as a 4-3 end, looks outstanding. Of course, they've got Cam Jordan. This is a defense that has been in feeding frenzy mode the last couple of weeks. They shut out Miami. They had 3 defensive touchdowns against Detroit. So if the offensive line is leaky, that's not good. And that much like Minnesota did, as a defensive coordinator, you're not earning your salary if you're not putting Brett Hundley on the spot. You're saying, make Brett Hundley beat us. And if he can identify the blitz and adjust the protection and make the play, then bully for him. But we're going to see if he can do it. And we're going to try to – this is a defense in that mode that we saw the Darren Sharper New Orleans defense the year they won the Super Bowl, just an opportunistic defense and not a liability and sometimes an asset for this team. Now, otherwise, though, what I did see on the positive side was he was negotiating the pocket well. He was escaping pressure well. He was keeping his eyes downfield. The touchdown to Devante Adams he made outside the pocket. He was showing the ability to throw the ball well on the move, most particularly the back shoulder throw, the ball placement and the timing on the back shoulder throws to Jordy Nelson and Devante Adams. They weren't just functional; they were good. I mean, there was synchronicity there between these players. I wouldn't expect Martellus Bennett, who's been a big disappointment. A tough year for some of my favorite players, which hurts me in fantasy because I'm emotional that way. I like to draft all my favorite players. But I don't think we'll see as much from him. I don't think we're going to see as much from the running game. It'd be interesting to see if they try to reestablish Aaron Jones in a base running game kind of way and do less Ty Montgomery. Although I almost wonder with Brett Hundley's ability to extend plays, a la what they've done with Deshaun Watson, almost incorporate into the offense the idea that he's going to put pressure on the defense when they put pressure on him. And it's going to be a back and forth kind of a match where the ideal of flushing the quarterback from the pocket can sometimes lead to your demise on defense because Brett Hundley can outlast the defense. He can make throws off of odd platforms, and he can absolutely you make any defense guard their players for more than 3 or 4 seconds, and things are going to start to happen that are good for the offense. Now, I don't know. Now, when I think of Green Bay as an organization, I don't think of them approaching it this way. I think of them just plugging in Brett Hundley, and they've been training him to be a facsimile of Aaron Rodgers. So, again, this is another thing where I can see in my mind where it could be good, and where I am not in a league with Matt Waldman. I was picking up Brett Hundley, but Matt Waldman. What's really fun about being in leagues together is, and I know what Matt has thought of Brett Hundley. I especially know what Eric Stoner's thought of Brett Hundley for a while. So in leagues that we were together, I had a feeling that he was going to go above and beyond. But otherwise, this could be very interesting though. He scored 30 touchdowns on the ground in college. Matt referred to the Eric Stoner, absolutely one of the best football minds out there, even though he's not out there in any sort of public fashion now. I think he identified that correctly, that there is potentially a lot more there than we saw at UCLA, and now we're going to get to see it. And I'll just toss this out there. Minnesota has Case Keenum, and we'll see about Teddy Bridgewater. Chicago, they can beat the Steelers in Baltimore, so I shouldn't.
Jacksonville.
Right. And Detroit is a team that, it just like was having a really good dream for the first few games of the season, then woke up and remembered they were Detroit again. So
Cleveland's a West Coast team.
So if Brett Hundley can just keep this team alive, and as Dr. Gene said, if we don't see Aaron Rodgers go on IR in the next few days, then they see something there. But looking ahead at Green Bay's schedule, after their bye, and they have a bye to get this straightened out now, coming up, Detroit, Chicago, Baltimore, Pittsburgh. Hey, Chicago beat Baltimore, Pittsburgh. Tampa, Cleveland, Carolina. Now, week 15, Carolina. That's about the time that we're thinking Aaron Rodgers might be able to return. They can still win this division. And they know that if they can just get into the tournament with a healthy Aaron Rodgers in the NFC, they can run the table. Anybody with Aaron Rodgers, you always can. So I wouldn't pronounce this season dead yet for the Packers.
Boom. What are we missing though? As you go through the progression there, what are we missing? Assuming rational coaching.
Well, it's because it's Mike McCarthy.
Do you trust Mike McCarthy?
No, I don't. But Brett Hundley might transcend that. Did I trust Bill O'Brien after he didn't even give Deshaun Watson a chance to win the job? No
first team reps in the preseason. Way to go, Bill O'Brien.
So no, so we don't. They're now. Brett Hundley's not going to be Deshaun Watson, okay? But I do think that Brett Hundley offers some things that you would think
he'll offer things better than Deshaun Watson as a thrower. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he may not offer the bells and whistles that they do that put Deshaun Watson in the perfect situation to be Deshaun Watson without having to overthink it.
No,
and if they did. The wild card here is going to be Randall Cobb. If they use Randall Cobb the way they could use Bruce Ellington and use all these other guys, that would be fun, but it's probably not going to happen.
So I opined that a player that we should use here is Jeff Janis or Trevor Davis. They need someone that can just, because watching Jordy Nelson on the deep ball, Matt, you saw it, the deep ball from Brett Hundley was beautiful. Came down in that beautiful, gorgeous cylinder. And Jordy Nelson's build-up speed that we saw all the way back to the Senior Bowl, like he's not a 4.4 guy, he's a 4.5 guy, but every 10 yards, his speed holds up. It wasn't there the way that it used to be. Trevor Davis maybe could have run under that ball. Jeff Janis could run under that ball. So some more go routes and getting those secondary receivers on the field to harness that. It's easy. His deep ball's easy distance, and you had someone like Tyreek Hill, like we saw tonight, who can accelerate with that extra burst. Then that can bring an element into play that they need, that they can harness with his arm.
I want the record to show I am the only person to ask Jordy Nelson about John Deere at the Senior Bowl.
I remember.
So there you go. Let's get some questions from the chat room. Dude, I love the chat room. You guys are awesome. And you ladies are awesome too. That's just awesome to be able to interact with you guys on a weekly basis here on the Audible Live. It is very awesome. And Rob is awesome. And he says, how excited should I be for Josh Doxson for the rest of the season, Matt?
Well, as an athlete, I love him. As a wide receiver, I love him. As a Washington Redskin, I'm not quite so sure, and also just from a health standpoint, as one of my favorite follows on Twitter, and he's one of my favorites, but I don't remember his name right now because I've had something to drink myself, maybe. But he's a Browns fan who's a friend of Eric Stoner's out in LA, and he was talking about how what he always remembered Josh Doxson to be is hanging about 20 feet in the air to catch a football. And I thought that's true, but it's the only place where he doesn't get hurt is when he's airborne. So, at least that's what it seems like right now. I'd just be concerned about, more than anything, about game script and usage. And this Washington team just seems a little inconsistent for me, even though when they're always playing well on the side of playing well, but have these inconsistent moments. And I just wonder about Gruden and when he gets grumpy about who he is and isn't going to use for whatever reason, what, he has a long memory about, he's kind of one of the more neurotic coaches I've seen, in recent years. So I like him as an end of the bench stash. I'm just not sure he's a guy that he has that upside to be a wide receiver one. I just don't think it's going to come to fruition this year.
Jordan, our man, Bloom, get this. Jordan, he says, guys, wife is 8 months pregnant, was talking to the baby, and we're going to spend Thursdays together with the Audible and watching football. And they kicked me in the head, taking it as enthusiasm. So, Jordan, my man, toast to you as well. Gary says, appears Melvin Gordon is limited in practice. We're watching that practice status for Friday. Goes up against the Denver D. Pretty much need him to sit this week, right? I've looked at Melvin Gordon as either a high-end RB2 or low-end RB1. And here's what it is. It's a trap, as I sound like Admiral Akbar, because it was 4 carries. And I think they ran the trap play like 5 times. But they busted one with Orleans Starkville last week. And it was 4 carries for 98 yards that the Giants were able to gash the Denver Broncos on. So it's that type of commitment to the run. Playing with the lead obviously helps. You saw the limited numbers of passing attempts for Eli Manning last week. But Melvin Gordon, Bloom, how concerned should his fantasy owners be in week 1? His 50 yards and 20 yards receiving, whatever, so about 70, 80 all-purpose yards, whatever the number was. It wasn't terrible. You don't want to get greedy, but what should and how should fantasy owners be looking at Melvin Gordon this week?
You play him. I mean, look, and if you really are having somebody that you're considering playing over him, at this point, it's Le'Veon Bell, Sean McCoy, Ezekiel Elliott, Kareem Hunt is playing tonight, Derrick Henry, depending on what happens with DeMarco Murray, but I think it's going to be Derrick Henry, Todd Gurley, maybe Devontae Freeman, Mark Ingram, Leonard Fournette, maybe Jerick McKinnon in a PPR league, maybe Jordan Howard, maybe Adrian Peterson. But I don't even think I would draw the line probably around Mark Ingram or Devontae Freeman. And even at that point, I would still probably tell you to go with Melvin Gordon because this offense is run so much better when he's the centerpiece of it. And unless I have some affirmative information that he's not going to run up to previous levels. And we saw what the Giants could do running at Denver. They sort of broke the mystique of what Denver had been doing against these running backs earlier in the season. Gordon has been running well. And at this point, I'd rather go down with him in the lineup, seeing that he was limited after all, than go down with him on my bench scoring another 25 or 30 points.
Chadler says, where's Crabtree tonight? Matt Waldman. What's up with Michael Crabtree?
Well, basically they're basically targeting Amari Cooper in zone defense or against the slot receiver Gaines pretty much all night long. So Cooper had a nice opportunity in the red zone to be able to make a catch, but it was a tough one, and he couldn't come down with it all the way. Otherwise, it's just been basically the Chiefs linebacker and safety going, "You got him, no, you got him, no, you got him," and Cooper running by them up the sideline, or flea flickers and different types of plays just designed to get Cooper involved, and it's just worked out very well for him overall.
It is the Audible Live Thursday night, and I am intermittent fasting, Bloom. I don't know if you heard about
you told me about that, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm losing some weight, right? I'm losing some weight, but I got to monitor when it comes to the beverages there a little bit better because, wow, Alive, what a great show. What a fantastic show. The biggest show. Gene,
that's why they say lightweight, Cecil. That's why they call it a lightweight. Yes. You're a lightweight.
Yes, Gina says we're all drunk. There we go.
And I would just want to say, take a moment out on that note, folks. Say, don't drink and text. Really, don't let a friend drink and text.
I don't even know where my phone is, so I'm good there. Let's talk about a question coming through from the chat room about Andre Ellington. Bloom. James actually asked, cut Ellington for Dion Lewis.
Yes, easy yes. And Dion Lewis is all systems go, and he's not necessarily going to be what he was in 2015, but he is going to be the most valuable back in the Patriots backfield. He's passed Mike Gillislee for carries between the tackles. He's passed him for red zone carries. They don't seem to be that interested in using Dion Lewis as a receiver as they were in 2015, which is strange to me because he's so excellent in space. But regardless, give me 15 Dion Lewis touches in the Patriots offense every week. That is a running back 2 in fantasy football.
Now I'm getting questions about intermittent fasting. I eat in an 8-hour window from 6:30 in the morning to 2:30. And then after that,
baby,
nothing.
ketones.
Yeah, there you go. So I want to lose weight like Matt Waldman. There you go, Matt Waldman. Let's wrap up the show with some final thoughts.
Man, I love these games. I mean, I love the Chiefs-Raiders games, and I think that, we got an exciting finish coming up, down the pike here with it. And I mean, maybe there's still a shot for Michael Crabtree to do something. Maybe Marshawn Lynch will come out in street clothes down the ramp, WWE style, and maybe
chair.
Yeah, with the chair, and come out with the chair, or with an entourage, and that could be a lot of fun. It would be fitting with these types of games, and I mean, this is probably my favorite rivalry in football, and it's nice to be able to get to do this with my two friends here, while we're checking out the game and talking ball. It's always a great time, and I just appreciate everybody who who tunes in every week and gives us all the feedback that they do, and we love you.
Well, and Matt's talking about the Demaryius Thomas screen. I briefly brought this up on Twitter, and some people don't want to admit this or realize this, but they don't run the screen passes because Trevor Siemian's not good at throwing screen passes. Bottom line. So whatever you want to take from that, go back. I want to urge everyone, go back, watch the 33-yard reception for Emmanuel Sanders, and watch Isaiah McKenzie break open on a post that would have been a 60-yard touchdown, and he wasn't throwing the ball. So anyway.
Chad Kelly.
There's your question. By the way, seeing Chad Kelly,
Andrew Luck.
He was by himself today, not working with a trainer. Obviously, can't work with the team, whatever. But he was just by himself. Like it reminded me so much of being a young shaver, Bloom, on the East Coast of Colorado, playing out at Grover, Colorado. Just like throwing the ball to myself, playing football by myself because my dad was too busy. This is truly on the couch. My dad was too busy to play football with me, and that's what it's. So when I saw Chad Kelly out there, and I've seen him working with trainers, right? But he was out there like throwing to himself, and I was like, "Wow, that kind of takes me back there, Bloom."
Yeah, and I suppose after everything that's happened with him, and some of the stories about how he's been put in timeout or detention, some things that happened, with his little brother's high school game, and just how he's got some growing up to do, and I suppose that's one way to encourage that. But it has been a great game tonight. And remember, after a few weeks, there was some talk about the product not being as good, ratings down, and a lot of other things about the game of football side. And everyone knows I'm down to talk ideology, politics, anytime, not necessarily on this show, but putting all that aside, the last 3 or 4 weeks, the product has been so compelling again. And it's not just the games. It's not just what the games produce, transcendent physical acts and emotion, like that Giants Denver game that you got to cover this week. That's about emotion. It's still human beings. No matter what we break down, no matter what analytics say, no matter what X's and O's say, it's still human beings, and it's still a game of emotion, and it's still a game where lots of incredible storylines cross, and not all of them are very noble storylines. I had an idea. You guys remember pop-up video from VH1?
Yeah.
Right?
What the hell happened to that?
I don't know, but somebody somebody should be pioneering the coverage of covering the NFL, where as players do things, little bubbles will pop up and tell you about the player, because a lot of times it will really enhance the richness. And I think that's one of the things about the culture of our show, and why we've attracted such a great audience, and they've made us better, is really enriching your understanding of everything that's happening in the game. And it's still so compelling. And again, some of these teams and some of these stories and the way they converge every week and what happens, we can't look away. And we're really lucky that people let us do this because they enjoy being part of it. And it's really, we just do it because we enjoy it.
Yeah. Sorry, Joe, for getting a little tipsy here on the Audible. I'm going to have Gina close us out, though, because she says, my final thought is that you guys are great, and so is everyone in the chat room, which has been reacting all night. You guys made my day. It's just good to be good, right? It's good to smile. It's good to pass on those general positive vibes. So, yeah, in these tough times, everybody just do that. Do that. Smile. Pass on those good feelings. Let the people know that you love. Let them know that you love them. And I'll let you guys know that I love you.
Yeah.
And we'll wrap up this program saying thank you very much for listening. As always, we appreciate each and every one of you. Follow us all on Twitter and tweet me about this very video. But as we say each and every week, besides cue the Chuck D, which, by the way, keep the videos coming, we also say stay tuned and stay frosty.
Because the greatest love.